Welcome. A very warm greetings to all. Thank you for joining us again for another Pariyatti Presents event. My name is Briha Sarathi and I'm here on behalf of Pariyatti as its Executive Director. We're grateful that you've all joined us today. For those of you who are not already familiar with Pariyatti, we're a non-profit charitable organization based in the USA. Our mission is to enrich the world by disseminating the words of the Buddha, providing sustenance for the seeker's journey, and illuminating the meditator's path. Pariyatti imports books from around the world, reprints books and publishes new titles, and converts existing material into digital formats. We protect and provide an enormous catalog of Dhamma resources in many languages and formats that otherwise would not be as easily available. We offer many free services, such as the Pariyatti Learning Center, the Treasures of Pariyatti, Dhamma Storytime, and Daily Words for Inspiration via email, RSS feeds, and our mobile app. We offer most audio and video material, as well as many ebooks and audiobooks free of charge, including a large number of resources for students of SN Goenka. We also organize donation-based residential Pali workshops and facilitate pilgrimages for Vipassana meditators. For more information about Pariyatti, please visit our website at pariyatti.org. So for today's event, we welcome a panel of Vipassana meditators in the tradition of Sayagyi U Ba Khin as taught by SN Goenka. Paul R. Fleischman will moderate the panel discussion, and the panelists are Michal Barnea Astrog, Wayne Smith, Marta and Patten, and Kory Goldberg. Paul is a retired psychiatrist and the author of books and articles about Vipassana. Michal is a writer, a researcher of psychoanalysis and Buddhism, a senior Hakomi trainer, and a therapist in private practice. Wayne is a musician. Marta is a documentary filmmaker. Kory is a humanities professor, author, and permaculture gardener. Please note that today's session has been pre-recorded, and it will not be followed by any questions and answers. Without further ado, I give you Paul, Michal, Wayne, Marta, and Kory.
My name is Paul Fleischman, and I've been asked to be the moderator for a Pariyatti conversation. The topic of our conversation is, what is it that helps you with your daily meditation at home? And what are the difficulties that you face with your daily meditation at home? The panelists we picked to participate in this are all people who've been meditating for decades. Our conversation will be entirely unrehearsed, spontaneous, and we hope to generate a kind of trusting conversation that you might have sitting around with friends. Some of the panelists are assistant teachers. Some of the panelists are old students. In either case, we've asked everyone to speak from themselves, from their own experience, rather than just saying what they think is best to say. We're hoping that everyone will say what's realistic for their circumstance. All the panelists have been picked because we know them to be friendly, warm, pleasant, and articulate. So we hope it'll be a very at-home, easy conversation. We've picked participants from a relatively similar set of time zones so that we could record this all at the same time. That means we had to leave out potentially equally excellent panelists who are in other time zones, particularly in Asia. But you could have a conversation on a similar topic with hundreds of different people who would be just as good to talk with, who might come from different time zones, or who might be somewhat less experienced as meditators. That might lead to a different kind of conversation. We'll ask each panelist to introduce him or herself before the conversation begins, and I'll be the moderator, hopefully tying in one person's comments to what other people have said, so that we'll not only speak to the camera or speak to the audience, but we'll speak to each other and create an actual back and forth ongoing conversation between all the people. So our topic is going to be, once again, what is it that you do that helps you to maintain meditation in your daily life? What are the challenges and problems that you face in maintaining meditation in your daily life? Let's go on. Kory, would you like to tell us who you are and tell us what's helping you with your meditation and what challenges you face.
My name is Kory Goldberg. I live in southern Quebec in the Eastern Townships, just on the Vermont border. I work as a college humanities and religion professor at Champlain College. And I have two teenagers now. One is 15 and one is 13. What has helped me meditate over the years has changed a lot. For many years before kids, I would sit 2 hours a day, if not more, easily. Once I started having kids and a family life and a job and a house and a car and all these other household responsibilities, it definitely became much more of a challenge, especially for the first 3 years of my son's life. He never slept more than 3 hours in a row. And at times he'd only sleep for about 45 minutes at a time. I would use those moments of insomnia to meditate. And then even after my kids did start sleeping throughout the night, sometimes for whatever reason, I just naturally, spontaneously wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and wouldn't be able to go back to sleep. So instead of freaking out, I would take the time and sit for an hour or 2 hours and then go back to sleep. Another really important aspect of daily sitting for me is having support. I have a very supportive wife. We sit together most of the time. Now sometimes we switch sit. And actually we haven't sat a course together in 15 years or 16 years since our children were born. But at home, we either sit together or we sit separately. And also having friends. We have a network of friends around us who sits with us from time to time. And we also, my wife and I run a permaculture farm that feeds 50 families. And we have interns come to stay with us. And on our profile, we talk about meditation and the precepts. So the people who come to intern with us are generally people who are really interested in the meditative lifestyle, as well as the appreciation engagement with nature. And so it's really nice having people come to the house for 6 months of the year, and we often sit together. So that's really good. And then also having friends who are elders who can provide support and advice. Paul has been, a wonderful help over the years. And so just mixing with all different age groups, people who are older, people who are younger, people who are my peers, having that great support system has really been key. I'd also say a big help is finding the motivation. So sure, I recognize all the therapeutic benefits to sitting. I recognize the connections sitting helps me form with other people. I see the benefits of diminished reactivity, but also even though I have all those benefits, sometimes when I'm on the cushion, my mind would just not really want to stay with the practice. And sometimes when the mind would get bored or the mind would get agitated, it would actually make me not want to sit. So I felt for me personally, I needed to develop some strategies for myself to help me sit. And just like simply setting up a motivation for myself every time I would sit. At the beginning of every single sit, I would say something like, may this training in awareness and equanimity help me cultivate peace, happiness, and liberation. And just creating that little motivation actually got me excited to sit. And once I was sitting, it helped carry me through the practice.
Well, this is already a lot of fun for me, and I can't wait to make the conversation go between people. But before we do that, let's jump to Marta. And Marta, can you tell us who you are and tell us your answers to these two questions?
Sure. I'm Marta. I'm from a bit nomadic, but I'm from Oregon, Washington, California, and now we're spending more time in Canada and India. So yeah, I am a documentary filmmaker, and I live right now in mostly Canada and Washington. Yeah, so what's been challenging? I guess, I think one thing that really helped me, maybe I'll just go with that first, was like Kory was saying, in terms of having some kind of motivation. For me, after my first course, I tried really hard to keep my practice. I was 21 years old, and I was in college. And I managed to keep it for 6 months. And then I remember the moment when I dropped it. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I was exhausted. And I just decided, no, I'll go to sleep. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And in the back of my mind, it was like, you're going to lose it. You will lose it. And I did, And then, after my third course, I remember I took a walk. And at the end of the 10-day course, Goenka said something like, now take a moment after this course to evaluate this and to decide, make a decision if this is the path for you or not. And actually I did that. I went to a park and I took a walk, and it was just like, I just had this conversation with myself. Like, I come from a pretty scientific family. My dad's a scientist in research. And I just decided, if you really want to see if it works or not, I mean, the only way to do it is to really do it. So I made a strong determination, like, I'm going to do this. And even if that meant, leaning, it's 11 o'clock at night, you had all this family obligation or something. And, even if it meant leaning against the wall or even lying down, but I was determined, but I am going to do my 1 hour, even if that means I fell asleep halfway through, but I made the effort to do my 1 hour. That really helped me. I mean, sometimes I would meditate on trains in the bathroom in India. I think that even if it was less than ideal conditions or less than ideal mind state, I think that helped a lot. And then just talking to people, like, I have a lot of, this strong determination quality in me is strong, but it also took me in the direction of going into extremes. So like talking to people about practice and pitfalls and, where I might be going to some extreme or the other, I think was really helpful. So it's just friends on the path. Even if it's just one friend on the path who you can talk to, I think that is really helpful, especially if you live in a really isolated area. Like, I've lived in pretty isolated places. So I haven't had a lot of people around me who I could meditate with, but just having a friend who I could open up to, because I was pretty shy to talk to teachers, actually. I didn't want to, say that I was struggling with this or that. I've learned to do that a bit more now, but that was hard in the beginning because you're trying hard to be a good meditator. So, yeah.
That's a good point. I'm going to want to come back to the role of teachers and feeling shy to talk to them.
Yeah.
But let's continue with getting everybody to introduce themselves and say what they think. Wayne, would you like to be our next person and tell us your answers to these two questions?
Sure. My name's Wayne Smith. I live in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. And the thing that really helped me to get established and still access a large source of support is that I was on the BMC Damodar staff for, I'm not sure how long now, maybe 10 years. I'm very part-time there now, but I'm someone that is, I kind of get swept away in extremes. And this was the case before meditating and when I was first at the center, and the case now is what I'm finding. And so for me, I saw how much I needed this practice just in order to survive, just with who I am. It seemed that my life just did not work without it in a very real way. And so it was medicinal at first. And then as I practiced more and saw just, more peace in my mind and more peace and more comfort in my life, that is what formed the inspiration. The practice itself formed the inspiration to keep going. But I was at the center sit serving for some time and being on staff for some time and having, all of my friends were, from that group of people, and we were meditating together and meditating at the center. And so it made it a lot easier. Maybe that's the thing that actually made it even possible for someone like me to establish. And I recognized that. And that was why I dove into being at BMC, was that it took me a long time to really gain regularity and faith in my practice. I was at the center from 2007 until about 2010, and then from 2014 until just about 2 years ago, I was full-time. Now I'm also I'm a cellist, and in addition to teaching at a few schools and having about maybe 20 or so students in Massachusetts, I also travel to Maine and to New York at least weekly, and that's been a great challenge to my practice. There are certain days when I am, leaving the house at 7 a.m., getting back at 1 a.m. With 10 hours of driving in there somewhere. And so on days like that, I'm not sure of the quality of that second hour. I can always get one, but the second one I feel like is sometimes perfunctory, and sometimes, in the extreme cases, even missed. And I beat myself up about it for long enough that I understand that that's really not the purpose of any of this. And so I just, try my best to fill those gaps. I think the thing that still really helps me is just still being connected to the center. So having, friends that are, from Damodara, getting calls, the center staff. I still serve as the registration coordinator, even though it's mostly remote now. And I think that people think they're bothering me when they call, but I absolutely love getting these little calls at random times that really just, and I think I'm being facetious, like, oh no, please call, please bother me, because it really, it helps so much to stay connected and to just like, I think that this element of service and how that really, helps to inspire, serving inspires sitting and informs sitting. So that's been really helpful. This Dhamma.org app has been very helpful as well. It's become so robust now, just now recently finding out that you can even set it to do a 1-day or 3-day or 10-day course for you. While it automatically plays the recordings. I've also gotten some of my family members into sitting and talking to them. Also, it seems like it helps too, because I don't know, it's probably, I don't know if it's the right way to go about it, but at some level I feel responsible to them to maintain this, because I know that it makes me better and I know that it helps them. And sometimes when I can't find the impetus to help myself, I kind of go around it and try to help someone else. And that reminds me to help myself. So, but this last year or so has been, challenging in terms of just not having a regular schedule. And so I have to, piece my inspiration together day by day.
Great. Yeah, this theme of connecting to other people, connecting to the app, connecting to friends, connecting to family, is supposed to be one of the themes of the century among all people. That is isolation and connection, even before the pandemic, and now with the pandemic more so. Maybe we'll get back to that and make it a main point of our conversation. But before we do that, let's ask Michal about your answer to these two questions, and please introduce yourself.
So hi, I'm Michal. I'm from Israel. I will not have as good English as you all. I'm a mother of 2 daughters. One is 15, one is 11, going to be soon. I teach a kind of psychotherapy and also a little bit of more academic stuff to do with psychoanalysis and also with some Pariyatti, some of the theory behind what we do. And I'm also a writer. I write a lot. Books. Started with the non-fiction, more academic writing, and now I'm also writing novels, which is a very good life for me. I don't know, when you wrote these questions, I don't have such an elaborate answer as you do, but the first thing that came up to me about what helps me is flexibility, I think. Because, you know, if I try to think of myself 22 years ago, when I took my first course, and all the way up until now, it's a different life. It's a different, in a way, it's the same mind and the same body, but in many ways it's not. So, you know, if before I could, you know, sit straight or kind of straight for 2 hours a day, no problem, and then I had children and all the fatigue and all the strange schedules. And I also, like Kory, like you said, when I was first pregnant, I remember at some point, I mean, it was 15, 16 years ago, but at some point, the body starts waking you up at 2 a.m. So I would meditate at 2 a.m. and all of these things. But a few years ago, I started having this physical condition where now all these things are not possible for me anymore. So I liked so much to wake up before sunrise and just to start my day, of course, with my 1 hour meditation. If it was supposed to be 5 a.m., it was 5 a.m. If it was supposed to be 4 a.m., no problem. And now I cannot do it because I have to lie down a certain amount of hours a day, otherwise I get sick. So many things have to change. I mean, so flexibility, I think, changing with the body, changing with circumstances of life. I mean, now when I sit, some of my meditation is lying down because I have to, you know, like we have our discipline sitting 2 hours a day and other things. I have now my discipline of resting. I'm not very good at it. To rest my head is not simple at all, but at least I have to rest my body. So same discipline, I have to do it a certain amount of hours a day. So if part of my meditation now is lying down, part of my meditation is leaning against cushions and with a cat on my lap, you know. So there were many years where I was disturbed by a baby or who wants, you know, something, or so it's just the flexibility of it, I think, that helps me. And the motivation is, well, I don't have any questions about the motivation. This is where I'm fortunate, and maybe less fortunate than you in other things that helps meditating. But this is where I have it easy. I don't have to find the motivation. It goes without saying, but yeah, my difficulties have to do, I think, with my restlessness, very strong restlessness. This is mainly my difficulty.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking that we actually are doing two things at once. One is we're having a very nice conversation among friends, just not all known previously, but it feels like it's close friends. The other thing we're doing is we're doing something of public service. We're actually speaking to people who are going to be listening to us. And so it's both for our personal help, we're all in this together, and it's also for helping others. The single most striking thing that I feel in listening to you is that each one of you is a person who's capable of working it out for yourself. Everybody's talking about change or flexibility or how it was different when you started after your first course or after your third course or after 20 years or before you had children or after your children or while you're a concert cellist or when you're living in a meditation center. Your life keeps changing and your practice keeps changing and you have to solve some problem for yourself. And each of you are solving it slightly differently. And each of you are solving it differently than the codified schema of how a person is said to be properly sitting. Each of you is making some intelligent, personalized strategy to renew your meditation at each new life stage and with each new circumstance you face. So one of the questions is, if people are not necessarily as resourceful, can't necessarily find their way, I think one of the things we're coming upon is pretty mature people, mature in age and also mature in Vipassana practice, who have figured this out. But what did you have to go through to figure it out? Can we go back and find those places where you were more lost than you are now? Maybe you feel you're lost now, and help those people who are in a stage where they're feeling lost and they're feeling, well, the way it's set up, 2 hours a day, never varying, always at the same time, always at the same spot, that's not working for me, but I don't know how to find my way. Would any of you have advice for that person who I think may be represented by maybe 1 million Vipassana students who right at this very minute would like to have some way of, not advice, what should I do, but advice like, how do I locate in myself my way of practicing? So any one of you would like to respond to that?
For me, I feel like resilience is so important, but in some ways it's like you have to practice and be truthful to yourself to develop that resilience and resourcefulness. And I think these kind of conversations amongst friends, like-minded people, people who are experienced is really important, because I know for me, a great challenge when I first started having children and I couldn't keep up the 2 hours a day, and then my practice was on and off for some time, there was this idea that if you don't sit 2 hours a day, you're practicing wrong. And although it's never stated, it is implicitly assumed. And that is a message that is often given off, unfortunately. But through just reflection and having conversations with some wise people in the tradition, I started to realize that there's a difference between a requirement and a recommendation. And that the 2 hours a day is not always appropriate for everyone, depends on where you are in your life stage. And just to have compassion for yourself. It's like, well, if I can't sit 2 hours a day, that's fine. Or if I need to lie down, that's fine. Like Michal, like Marta, and maybe you, even Wayne, often my meditation is lying down, or I'm supported by cushions or a bolster, and that's what I need to do. And the more I recognize that 2 hours a day is really like this, 20th century creation by Goenka in order to help facilitate some institutional role or function in our tradition. It's a tool that serves a purpose. And it's like Paul once said to me, there's nothing like inherently true about eating breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. It's not like practice is to have breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. 2 hours a day is really important. The 2 hours a day is important, but it's not the only way, the correct way that the Buddha taught. The Buddha never taught 2 hours. There's no time limits.
Just because they had so much longer to do it, so.
They did, but not lay people. I mean, if you were lay people back then and you were an agricultural laborer, you were working, and don't forget, in that part of the world, it gets dark at 6:30 p.m. and it only gets light at 6:30 a.m. So maybe it's not like in North America anyways. On the East Coast, we have much longer daylight hours. So I all that's to say is that I feel like being truthful to oneself, being compassionate towards oneself, forgiving oneself. I think this self-love is really key, and that's been a help for me.
Thank you, Kory. Wayne, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, actually, I'm happy that Kory spoke before me because it helped to clarify some things. But actually, both Kory and Michal kind of spoke to the fact that you have to be this flexibility and sort of being honest with yourself. Being at the center, I was in this weird situation, or working at the center, I should say, serving there in the office full time. just to be clear, I had this strange situation where at 2:30 every day, the office shuts down, everyone goes and meditates. Or, during any group sitting, we all stopped whatever we were doing and we all went and sat together. And it sort of made it very easy to 2 hours a day, at least because that was just sort of how the day was structured. In addition to that, you're around people who have, at least for some time made Vipassana their first priority or a main priority at least. And so there was this world of everyone that I knew sat at least 2 hours a day. And it was helpful at the time, but at times when I would leave the center and struggle to maintain my practice, I think with the way that I was processing that information, it kind of backfired, kind of like Kory was saying, where if there was a day where I sat 1 hour, then I felt that I had not accomplished my goal as a meditator, or that I had not accomplished the goals of the practice, and I would ultimately stop sitting altogether. And then, coming back to a daily practice, I can see the benefits of, I've experienced now 0, 1, and 2 hours a day, and definitely 2 works better for me, but it's very difficult. And I just have to understand that there are going to be some times when logistically it's not possible. This idea of flexibility and self-assessment, I was thinking of seeing many applications as a registrar and seeing the way people answer that question, do you maintain your practice? And you'll get the old student that says, no, I only sit 10 to 12 hours a week. And then you get another student that says, yes, 15 minutes a day, and they're so happy about it. And I think it's important to understand, the benefit of why we do this and the benefit of, the amount of practice that we can do. And that most people, with one exception that I know, most of the people that I know that do sit 2 hours a day built up to it. They, you in fits and starts, or 1 hour, or, you sit a course, you're inspired, you go home and sit for 2 hours, that turns to 1. And then we build back up as we find place for it in our lives, and as it finds a place in our lives. So I think it's just, sometimes it's the result itself that inspires, continued action.
One of the ways that people are phrasing things, Kory, you first used the phrase finding your own motivation. And Michal, you said, well, you know your own motivation. But I think we're talking about two slightly different things. One is the motivation to sit, and the other is the motivation to sit 2 hours a day sitting up. Those are two slightly different topics. And that's one of the main things that's coming out of this conversation, is people not only have to tailor their meditation practice to their life in terms of the schedule, but also the actual physics of how people meditate is different, and the motivation is different, and it differs with person, but it differs with life stage, family situation, work situation. One thing I want to get back to, all panelists, maybe this is an unconscious bias when the panel was picked. The unconscious bias may be all of you are people who have a job or profession or work that requires some creative process. None of you can simply wake up and stumble through life. If you're making a film, if you're playing a cello, if you're teaching a class or writing a book, if you're writing many books in different genres, how does meditation fit into the creative life? Is it squashing your creative life because you have to spend so much time meditating? Is it amplify creativity because you're hearing more of your inner voice? Is it unconnected to your creativity? Anybody would like to comment on the creative process in meditation?
Wow. One of my favorite questions. Yes. For me, it's well, and actually I have to give a talk that is related to it next week. So I don't know. Let's see what happens. But for me, it's just opening up the creativity. I think if I can say a little bit more about it, is I think there are so many internal places and motivations and layers of the mind from which you can create whatever you create. I mean, there are many forms of creativity and creation. And when I was younger and I was writing, at some point I just said, well, I'm writing not from a good place. I'm writing from a place of suffering, from a place of self-absorption. I was very young, and I said, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm living it. If it ever comes back from a different place, it will come back. If it doesn't ever come back, doesn't matter. I'm not doing it anymore this way. And I left it. I left it for many years. And it took time. It took time until I started hearing a voice in my mind that was writing something. The voice, I heard the voice, and then I started writing about maybe 8 years ago or something. And then again, a few years ago, I started hearing the voice that was narrating something more, differently. Something that became prose. Something that became even a little bit of poetry. That was what I started with in the past. But so I think when I'm writing, Vipassana is so present for me because I can feel from which place of what is the space that the words come out from, if it makes any sense. It's like listening to music. This is, I don't know the word in English, but this is the zzz kind of sound, this harmony, and this is the harmony. This is the melody is now it's flowing, and now it's not flowing. Or this is, oh, no, this is completely artificial. It comes from a very superficial place. It's not interesting at all. I throw it away. So for me, writing is very, very meditative because it has all the time this looking inwards and listening and tuning up with things, and just waiting for something real to come, not something that I'm imposing. I'm not imposing on the words, on the characters, on the story. I don't know what the story is going to be. And I have this, it's a practice for me, it's like, I have to let go. I have to let go. Maybe it will come, maybe it will not come. Who knows? And I have to be patient.
Meditation is a kind of listening.
Completely. And it's about not being, you don't know what the result is going to be when you're meditating. You're just meditating because this is the thing that you do now. So, same thing.
So musicians, filmmakers, professors, any other comments on this point? Meditation. Kory.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you just said about writing, Michal, because I was getting stagnant in my own writing after doing a lot of writing around my PhD and co-authoring along the path. And then I just sort of stopped as I was teaching more and raising kids. And just in the last few months, I started journaling. Actually, the last time I journaled was more than 20 years ago when I was traveling. And I've started again 20 years later. And it's like you say, the act of just free flow writing is a meditative act in itself. And I find with meditation and creativity that there's sort of two sides to it. Because on the one hand, the more I sit with an open mind, I feel like my sense of wonder expands and I just become more receptive in my relational awareness, my cognitive awareness, my sensory awareness, my emotional awareness. All of this just expands and allows me to be more creative, whether I'm working in the garden or I'm writing or I'm designing new curriculum, playing sports. I recently started playing the mandolin. And so that's become a bit of a meditative experience as well. So it's very life affirming and life engaging. But on the other hand, if I'm not diligent in my sitting practice, all this creative energy that gets built up can take over my sitting practice. And rather than actually doing the practice, I'm just thinking about what I'm going to write, and I'm thinking about the courses I'm designing or the classes I'm putting together or the next piece of music that I want to learn how to play. And that becomes the object of my meditation. And I actually sort of lose, I get distracted, I should say. I get distracted. So one way I've been dealing with that is when I sit down, I say to myself, okay, this issue, this task, this creative project is very likely to arise in my mind. Don't let it distract. Don't let it invade. And if it does, just recognize and come back to the practice. But I'm recognizing sort of the danger of that creativity to take me away from the awareness of my breath or my sensations. So it's interesting to watch that happen. But overall, I'm very, the practice has really been a boon to my creativity and my sense of wonder and my just the courage to experiment and explore.
Marta, you're shaking your head very vigorously.
Yeah.
Kory,
Well, I don't actually have that. I always wished I did have that, where when I meditated, all these ideas for films would come up. I actually don't have that. I'm much more, it comes when I work, when I'm in the work, that's when it comes to me. But I struggled a lot with, just in terms of being lost, going back to that a little bit. I always struggled with just, people always say, oh, there's so much benefits in meditating. I actually struggled seeing that, seeing the real benefits for me, because yes, okay, I'm a bit more equanimous, but then the next thing comes and it's more challenging than the last. And my equanimity isn't quite up to speed for that. And so you're constantly feeling like, I'm not really making progress. I'm just not making progress. What is wrong with my practice? And so I actually recently started this thing called an angry journal. And,
I did that too. I did that too.
Yeah. And I was like, because I was like, what happens when I get angry or when I get sad, or how do I deal with it? How do I manage it? And I was like, I don't want to fill out that journal. Something would happen and I didn't want to write in it. And then I did write in it. And now when I read back on it, it's only been like a couple months or something, but when I read back on it, it's so cute and funny, actually. And like, it makes me feel much more compassionate towards myself. Because when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is such a big deal. But when I read it, it's so kind of funny and kind of ridiculous how we act when we get overwhelmed. And somehow it's making me feel a bit more compassionate to my process. In terms of creative life, when I kind of realized I had this tendency towards images, I just have it, I'm drawn to images and I'm drawn to words, and just letting the intuition kind of take over and not being so judgmental, just trusting the process. I found that I could let it, I could just let it happen and trust that I could let that happen. So, I've read a lot about artists who say they feel like an imposter. It's like you want to do something, but you feel like you're faking it, that kind of feeling. And, that would happen. I'd be in the middle of making this project and I would just get overwhelmed with these feelings. And I would say, fine, I'm just going to go lie down for a while. I just lie down, just like let all those feelings be there. And then when I kind of felt a little more relaxed, then I would go start again. And then again, that would come up and it's fine, let's just take a break, So I just wanted to say that, because it's not always so like, I'm going to do this and you just do it. There's so much struggle with all this stuff.
So everybody seems to be implying there's some sort of process that's not linear, it's not controlled, and yet there's some relationship. Wayne, I want to be sure that we capture your thoughts on the connection between art and the process, if any connection at all. Let's get Wayne's answer on this.
Well, so much of the creative process happens behind the scenes, as it were. I mean, it's not behind the scenes for the artist, but in terms of how much time we spend on our, and whatever the discipline is, versus how much you present or how much you share with other people. And, you know, I tell my students this, but I can't seem to quite learn it. I've been trying to learn how to play the cello for 40 years. And every day I make mistakes. And every day those mistakes surprise me. And I don't know why. I should be used to it by now, right? And so it sort of touches on how many there's a part of the process a part of the creative process and the process, the physical process of playing the cello, that for me at least is very difficult, and it's never quite perfect. And you know, there's no real negative outcome from that. However, it makes one really, let's say it makes my sensations really readily available to me. It's sort of all these other complexes, something to really glom onto. And I can then project that if I play this note sharp, you know, I must be a terrible person, you know, to exaggerate. But there is a strong amount of vulnerability, even when I'm alone, and especially when I'm with other people, that really comes into play. And, you know, having a meditative practice really does help to moderate that. It also, I feel like whatever inhibitions are there are somewhat quelled, or at least, you know, assuaged by meditation. Attenuated might be a good way to describe it. And so those things are maybe not getting in my way and allowing me to explore what's inside and explore what I'm willing to share with other people as a musician. There's just a high degree of sensitivity and vulnerability that making music. You know, the cello is an instrument. You can't lie through the thing. It's plaintive, and it just puts it all out there. At least, and that's the thing that attracts me to it. But that's also the thing that's terrifying about it. Another way that I find that it's been really helpful is I'm primarily a chamber musician. So I play with a piano trio. I'm a pianist and a violinist, and I play with a string quartet. And so there's lots of interpersonal dynamics at play when you have to try to solvable. And so much of what we do is arbitrary. And I'm on the edge of, you know, maybe being too ambivalent about it and thinking that everything is too arbitrary. There's other people that are very like, it has to be this way. Well, I'm also like that too. But so come in, and that's where, you know, the practice really helps in a really real way. And also, you know, I can't remember, it was some podcast that I heard of. It was, you know, just someone, they were basically talking about entering these rehearsal spaces and concert spaces really with metta at the front of their minds, and with the understanding that everyone that you're playing with, you know, they're also maybe struggling with these things, or maybe, you know, we all have our own struggles, and you know, just wishing them the best for what they're doing, what they're bringing to the table, wishing the best for the audience for, you know, what they're coming there to experience. And more than anything, I think that's really helped in terms of how it helps to open up my creativity and open up my willingness to be vulnerable. And it also allows me to forgive myself when I make mistakes. It all sort of folds in on itself in a really wonderful way.
How do you do that? Sorry. I was just going to ask Wayne, how do you do that? I mean, right before you enter the concert room, you consciously do that, or before you leave the house, or?
There's usually a 45-minute to 3-hour drive involved. So during that time, you know, in the past, I would put on the piece I have to play and listen to it again and again and again and get all worked up about it. Instead of that, I just sort of focus on what is the positive outcome of this thing. And sometimes it's more in a intellectual kind of metta if I'm not really feeling it. Then other times I feel like I'm actually generating metta. It really, really changes the environment and changes the experience. And, you know, it's something that I've been doing as a real focus only since maybe September. And those 6 months or so, it's been really impactful, just really impactful with how I'm interacting with the group. And it feels as though, how it just brings positive energy to the whole thing.
Let me ask one more question that comes out of things that everybody has referred to this part. And I would say, here's something that all of you have been saying that I don't feel has been as clearly expressed before. I've heard it more clearly from you. So I'd like to hear it emphasized or clarified from any one of you. And that is this aspect of self-love. All of you have commented on some self-criticism, some self-doubt, some feeling of inadequacy, some feeling of being lost, some feeling of not doing it right. But you've also commented on this need to find some self-motivation, self-love, self-affirmation, self-acceptance. And I'm wondering if you can highlight that. Where does that come from in Vipassana? Why are you getting that out of your meditation? Any further comments about that? The aspect of self-love and what's that got to do with Vipassana? Why does that come up whenever somebody starts talking about Vipassana?
I mean, I kind of alluded to my tendency towards extremes a bit before, but I just find the mind is so tricky. In the name of Vipassana, you can create an environment for yourself that is actually excruciating. So, I had this tendency towards sitting long hours and, pushing that more and more. And I found physically I could do it. Physically, I could do it, especially in my 20s. Now I'm not. But I wasn't aware of, or at least I had tricked myself into thinking that that was actually a good thing. But my mind was becoming more and more rigid, and it was becoming like a military sergeant, like that. I mean, not that they're all bad, but there's some that are not so compassionate. And I was always analyzing, how long did I sit? And it was always about the time. So it was almost like a sport, like an extreme sport. I was all about the time. How long did I sit? When I moved, did I wait to the bell or not? And I remember this one time I sat and I was sitting and sitting. I was like, gosh, the bell hasn't gone. It must have gone off. Finally, I get up to, I'd been sitting for, 4 hours. But walk out, it's 10 o'clock at night. Everyone's gone to bed. And it was a 20-day course. So my discourse was in the afternoon. So I was sitting by myself in my cell in India. And I walked out and the sea breeze came. And it was like the most wonderful feeling just to be outside with the wind on my face and kind of realize that was my first inkling towards, you are getting this wrong. Like you're forcing yourself to behave in a way that you think is the right way to meditate, but you've completely lost the plot. Like it's not about that. It's about understanding these organic flows and tendencies and needs of the body and the mind, understanding when the mind needs a break. I mean, it took me years, 15 years to figure out, how do you figure out when to take a break, And I think the best way it was described to me, I was talking to a friend of mine from Israel, and he was describing how for him, it's like he's observing, and then suddenly the mind starts to be outside, like it's not really in the body observing the sensation, it's like outside of that, and is almost picturing or visualizing it. And for him, it was time for a break at that point, because he'd sort of come outside of the body. And I thought that was really beautiful, like a really beautiful way of describing it. So I could start to explore in different ways, when is it time just to take a break? And for me, that was really about self-love, because I had become so harsh, So.
Michal, I feel like I should specifically request your comments on this, since this is a field you're a world expert in. What's the connection between?
Oh my God.
No pressure.
No pressure. No, because I'm thinking that this journey from rigidity and from really, it has so many forms. I think violence has so many forms, and it's, first of all, we are, I think a big part of this path is from violence to non-violence, or from rigidity to softness, from being harsh to being soft. And there is no, I don't even have to say it, but first of all, we encounter it inside. I mean, the violence we direct it towards ourselves, You know, this is, I think, one of the things that we learn in Vipassana is how a negative reaction, this is just a prototype name for it. It doesn't speak to me much, but how hatred or remorse, even like strong remorse, regret, worry, how it, first of all, it hurts me, it hurts myself, and we feel it. So, you know, so I think that this path, one of the main roots of it is from harshness to softness, from violence to gentleness, and it cannot bypass ourselves, because it's all going through ourselves.
So I actually, both Marta and Michal really touch upon two really important points for me. One is this sort of athleticism that we bring to meditation, this rigidity and constantly measuring in terms of time. I did that for years, and to some degree, I still do it, much less so. For me, time is the most important resource. I never seem to have enough of it, and I'm always like fighting against time. And unfortunately, sometimes I bring that to my practice. So the more I recognize that, the more I'm able to soften, as Michal was pointing out. And the more that I taste this softness, this gentleness, the more I'm able to experience self-love. And for me, self-love is really important, not just for myself, but for others. And I could say that really became clear to me when I became a father. Okay. Before, I was much more self-centered, and everything was just about me. But all of a sudden, when you have children, in my experience, it's no longer about me. My whole life is just serving my children. When they're, even today, I'm a chauffeur. 7 days a week, I'm either going to a ski hill or a soccer field, or, you know, school, or wherever, dance class, horseback riding. Like I'm always in the car, driving my kids, because we live in a rural area. And so it's just service. And when I'm okay with myself, and I'm compassionate towards myself, and I'm equanimous with what's going on in my mind and body, then I can perform those services for my family effortlessly and joyfully. Really, joy is such an important. But when I'm agitated and frustrated, and I'm caught up in my own story, then I do those things with resentment or discontentment. And so when I see that, I'm like, ooh, I need to love myself some more. And actually, the perfect example happened just before the call. My daughter was supposed to go snowboarding, and she realized she left her snowboard at school, and she was meeting all her friends. And this is like just 10 minutes before the phone call. And she had her grandmother's old snowboard, but like the bindings were opposite. And at first I'm like, ugh. And they said, no, how can I be like, I'm going into a telephone conversation about meditation. This doesn't make sense at all. You know, that's the definition of hypocrisy. So I'm like, I breathed through it. I observed, I took a moment, and then I was able to do the task in a few minutes, and it got done. Problem solved. I'm happy. My daughter's happy. Because if I'm frustrated, I'm just transferring that negativity towards my children. Especially my daughter is very sensitive. And so she's a very good mirror for me. So the minute I see her becoming upset, I'm recognizing there's these sankharas just going on and on and on inside of me, and I'm not even aware of them. So this self-love is about myself, but it's so much relational. It's so much about how I'm engaging with my family, with my friends, with my colleagues.
You know, I think we've created a really pressure relieving conversation, a real face of unguarded, spontaneous communication that other people will greatly benefit from. There'll be a tremendous sense of relief when people listen to this freewheeling and very person by person conversation. So I think this is a good place to end. Super, super fun. Thank you. It was really
So thank you so much, Paul, Michal, Wayne, Marta, and Kory for joining us today. On behalf of Pariyatti, I would like to thank you all for attending this event. As a small resource-limited nonprofit organization, we rely on volunteers to help us wherever possible. And today's event would not have been possible without the generous support of both Tina Sabla and Chandra Gupta. So thanks again for your help. It is much appreciated. Thank you.